the reason I wanted you to be able to see this is we got a few little housekeeping things here. Remember which ones. I think it's this one. Yes. Was it anyone's birthday this week?
Mine was in July.
Yours was in July. I totally wasn't
Emmy's
thinking about
was
that. But Emmy's birthday, how old are you?
21.
21. Wow. My son Zach just turned 21 a couple weeks ago. So Emmy, in respect of your birthday, I pulled up all these different cake wrecks. I don't know if you've ever seen those before.
Nut allergy.
Happy birthday, not really. This is an intervention about your drinking problem. Congrats, Jonathan on 10th. Congrats, Wendy on 5 p.m. And happy birthday. I don't know. Happy birthday, Mark with the C. So Mark, you should add a C. Happy birthday, Christinus. Happy birthday over the name. Happy birthday, L-A with sprinkles. Happy wishes, Suzanne. Underneath that, we will miss you. Happy birthday, Jen with 2 in blue. I'm not paying for all of this. That's a beautiful horse, I think.
Looks like a dead horse.
I know. Happy last birthday, Patrice. Nut allergy, happy birthday, Peter. Happy Barthy. Happy birthday under that, Ellen. Happy birthday, Lisa, and then this dolphin-looking creature. Leave blank. And what is this one? Happy birthday, just happy birthday. So happy birthday, just happy birthday.
Oh my goodness.
Just wanted you to know.
It's the most cakes I've ever seen.
Getting your high-end birthday cake at the Walmart bakery. Okay, all right. We'll talk about this after we talk about nonprofits. So each of you selected a nonprofit. We'll just go around the room. Let's start with our Zoom people. Max, which nonprofit did you pick and what's one of the key characteristics?
Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yep.
I chose the church, the local church, as the best nonprofit organization because it is involved in the community. In the local church, like if you're giving money to the church, which we all should be through tithing and through donations and stuff like that. We know exactly where that money is going. We can even participate in helping see where that money is going, and also it's just very active, or at least it should be very active in the community as far as helping its members and outreach to those in the community as well.
All right, great. Okay, Katie, which one did you pick and why?
Yeah, so I timed it like the wrong way, and I researched like the top nonprofits in America. So like the first 5 were like the Met, the Metropolitan Museum of Art, American Civil Liberties, Amnesty International USA, Planned Parenthood, and then the American Heart Association. So I just kind of looked at like how each of these different nonprofits target their audience to get so much funding to become the top nonprofits in America. So like the Met knows how to target celebrities and like super rich people so they can get more donations in. American Civil Liberties and Amnesty International know how to target like the liberal, their liberal younger audience. And so we have like such like a divide in our nation right now. Planned Parenthood, they're just everywhere, and that's like such a big issue, so it's not really hard for them to be super popular and get donations right now. And then the American Heart Association, they know how to target it because like heart disease, it said, was like the #1 killer in the world, followed by strokes. So because of that, they can get a lot of donations just because it's so well known. And yeah, that's what I found.
Okay, all right, we'll start here. Jared, which one did you select and why?
Well, since I wasn't smart enough to be cheap like Max, I I chose,
Cheap like Mac. So that's the first time you'll ever be accused of being cheap for selecting the church. It's the Lord's nonprofit.
it's the only time I'll be cheap compared to Max.
Oh,
So-
cheap compared to Max. No, that's that. He's got a point, Max. He's got a point. That's a rare occasion.
Well, I chose the American Museum of Natural History because, well, Rolex, did you know, is also a nonprofit organization, but I went with this. I really appreciate museums, especially in today's modern era where people are, really digitally based, and going to a museum is kind of a bit of an effort, and it's for learning purposes, and it can be kind of gone with the times if we allow it. But American Museum of Natural History was one of the first search results that came up. That was a museum. So I did a little bit of boop-a-doop research on it. And I really appreciate the conservation of artifacts and pieces of history, especially when it comes to nature. Like they've got displays of course, from dinosaurs and from extinct animal species and habitats and stuff like that. Although we would not agree with their interpretation of a lot of natural history, it is still a great effort by a lot of really good people to appreciate nature. And so it's just something that I really enjoyed.
Plus that disco thing that happens after midnight.
Oh yeah.
I'll start.
I couldn't get
Was
through
anyone else thinking about Night of the Museum the whole time you was
I
talking?
couldn't get through the first one.
Thank you. Sorry. Really? What?
Boring.
Because
I was saying, we should watch it for class. and talk
That's
about
a- that's a-
leadership in that movie.
Rami Malek's first
They're
big role.
alive.
Okay, all right. Daniel.
I chose United Way, partly just because it's something that my organization is a huge part of. So, in researching them, it was kind of cool to see their biggest focus is getting involved in the community in regard to like people struggling financially, physically, educationally. And so kind of also what intrigued me about it is they seem to be really successful. They've been around for over a century now, and they've been doing really well. And you kind of see them everywhere. And a large part of that success, at least it seems to me, is that they've made donations so easy because all they do is just say, hey, we're going to take $1 off of each paycheck or something like that, or $2. So Viridian actually incentivized it by saying anybody who donates like every week to United Way will let you wear like casual day or something like that. So I think that is a huge part of their success, is just how easy they made it. Because a lot of people don't want to take the time to like write a check and send it somewhere. If I click through all these buttons and stuff, like I just don't even realize it. It just comes out of my check.
Yeah.
So those wage deductions is like a really good key factor, I think, for them.
Huge. Alyssa.
I chose Christian Youth Theater. It's the largest nonprofit theater arts program in the United States. And I think one of the reasons that it's so successful is because they're dedicated to excellence. So they have, they're training kids that are like 8 years old all the way up to 18 in theater arts. So they're taking classes and they're trained by professional directors, stage or whatever. So they are trained by people that excel in their art and that they know what they're doing. So that's, I think, part of the reason that it's so successful. But I think another reason is because just the team that is at each branch is dedicated to its students. Like they genuinely care about the students and the families, and they establish like actual connections with the families. So it's kind of like one big family. And so, people feel safe to come there, and they feel safe to come and like be vulnerable and try new things. So that's why it's so successful partly.
How big is?
I don't remember how many branches there are nationwide, but there's like, it's spread all across the nation how many branches there are. And then like within each branch, there's a bunch of different little counties that do like that have classes and shows. And then sometimes they'll come together and like do big county shows. So, but I'll have to look up how many branches there are.
Where do they get most of their funding? Sorry, you might not know, but.
I don't know.
Okay, yeah, I'm just
I
curious.
know that they charge like for the shows, obviously, so that's a big part of it. But like, like one of the shows that I was in, it cost like, I want to say they said it was like 3,500 to, or 35,000 or something like that to put on one show.
Mhm.
So it's expensive, but
Wow.
I know
Okay.
that people like donate and stuff to it.
Yeah,
That's
most
the main
nonprofits
thing.
can't survive just on fees they have to have. So, okay, Emmy, what'd you choose?
I chose Doctors Without Borders. I think it's because that was really one of the ones that popped into my mind first. Just I've heard a lot about it, like in the past and everything. And I think I also looked at the list similar to what Katie had looked at. And the list that they had is like I think of 50 nonprofit organizations. And it wasn't, while it wasn't high on the list, like as like the most popular that people would know of and everything like that, but it was the most popular like in the public eye. So they had like a point system of like how many, like I guess just how popular it is with people just in general. And it had like a higher point even than like Planned Parenthood and some of the ones that she had mentioned. So I thought that like really stood out for itself. So while they weren't like super like high in other areas in the public eye, they were really well known and like, well recognized. So I thought that was like spoke for them really well. And they have a kind of like a mission statement type thing, just called "Go Where People Are," and that like really it's kind of like well, duh, but I think it's really cool because I think a lot of other organizations they might not go certain places because of like certain reasons and everything, but because it's nonprofit. And they're independent and everything like that, they're able to go to different places and have like the resources and the ability to do that. So yeah, and when just since 1980, this is from the article that I had read, like on the website itself, it has been open. It has opened in 28 different country offices in 28 different countries. Sorry, and it employs more than 30,000 people. They've helped over 100 million people. Just with like natural disasters, civil wars, and everything like that. So just going where people might not have the help that they need in order, and then giving them that help medically.
Yeah, Doctors Without Borders, what you said, yeah. So it's almost like a medical missions trip, but not necessarily tied to a religious organization. Yeah, I've heard from many physicians and nurses, it's kind of their outlet for being able to do short-term relief work and stuff. Joe, what'd you choose?
Well, I didn't think anybody else would do this, but I also did the local church. I did the local church because not necessarily what it is right now, but what God created it to be. Because I believe God created it to like take care of the sick and the poor and feed hungry people and do all the things that we see other charities do today. So I think, and it's supposed to reach the lost, which is the most important thing the church can do. And I mean, we see that through them supporting missionaries. So I'd say that's the best thing to support because it's directly going to help reach the world for Christ. And all the other things are important to take care of the Bible says that too, but I think reaching the lost is the most important thing. And there's a lot of, like, you don't have to support just your local church, giving to just your local church, but I think churches outside of America and other countries do a lot more like the social helping, like feeding the poor, helping the hungry, and or feeding the hungry, helping the poor and the sick. And so I think those are even more important to give to. So maybe that implies giving to mission boards or whatever, but I think that's the best thing.
It's interesting. A lot of hospital systems were started by religious organizations. So St. Mary's or St. Luke's or Methodist Hospital. You notice there's Baptist hospital system. There's, almost every city in America has at least one or two hospital systems that were started by a religious organization. And then a lot of hospitals are nonprofits, so they were started that way, and then they remain nonprofits. So a lot of money is generated in a hospital, of course, but all that has to go back into developing the hospital. You can't have the board members can't make a profit off of it. So, but I've heard preachers over the years say, you know, if the church was doing its job, then you wouldn't need all these other government organizations or nonprofits. So, you know, for sure the church should be doing more. It's, you know, as God calls people to step out and take care of fatherless and widows and things like that. So,
I guess in our country though, it's like so developed that there's not really poor people and hungry people to the extent that other countries have. So
Right.
it's not really as much of a need.
yeah, you have underserved communities, but you don't have the abject poverty that, like in Manila, they had across the street from the hotel where my mom was staying when she was getting her cancer treatment. There was a village of probably 10,000 people living in cardboard houses, and it like rains every day. And then while they were there, my mom was there for cancer treatment for 6 weeks. It caught on fire and burned all the cardboard up. No one was killed, I believe, but once it took off, you know, and so you already had these people who are basically homeless, and now they're really, really, really homeless. They're begging on the streets and stuff. So yeah, we probably just don't even hardly understand what it's like compared to other countries and stuff. So yeah, something going back to a few of the secular nonprofits you guys mentioned, or federally registered religious nonprofits. When I was in the military, they had this thing called the Combined Federal Campaign, the CFC. So if you're a federal employee, you can do what Daniel's company is doing, where you take a little bit out of every paycheck and give it to United Way. The Combined Federal Campaign is the federal government's way to facilitate charity and generosity. It's weird. I don't know if there's any other government America has got so many things about it that's messed up, but then we're a country where literally even special forces, Green Berets can take $2 out of every paycheck and give it to, you know, Mothers Against Drunk Driving or United Way or the Baby Bottle Project or whatever, Toys for Tots. And the Combined Federal Campaign, what it does is it takes like 1,000 different charities and it lists them all into one site, and then you can select anyone that's on the approved list and how much you want to give to it. And then the federal government tracks how much people are giving to it, and they set goals every year and stuff like that. So instead of, and of course, all the big ones, Red Cross and American Heart and United Way are all the biggest recipients, but then it gives opportunity even for much smaller charities and micro charities to receive people's donations and stuff like that. But what Daniel touched on, the success for many charities is having a way that people can give regularly. So like the American Red Cross, for example, people give to the American Red Cross because it is just easy to identify. They do CPR training and they're on the ground every time there's a disaster, and they have commercials, and everyone just recognizes American Red Cross. Well, American Red Cross, if I'm not mistaken, you could look it up. They're the president of the American Red Cross as a nonprofit still has a 7-figure salary, I believe. They make like in the millions. And the way they justify it is they have to bring in the hundreds of millions every year. So percentage-wise, the head of the American Red Cross, although they make a huge CEO type salary, proportionately to what they bring in, they say, well, we have to pay someone that because they got to be the caliber of leader that can afford, that can bring in the donations. And so, but there's a list comes out every year of how much money that you give to a charity actually goes to the work versus how much goes to all the other stuff. And it's pretty shocking. Some charities, only like 10% actually goes to the field, 90% goes to, the workers. So it makes people cautious about where they give their money. Red Cross is one of the biggest ones that people get upset about. What is that bird up on the roof? Is that a hawk?
Oh my goodness.
Sorry, you Zoomers.
just stand by a second. A huge hawk just landed on the roof.
He's eating on something.
Yeah, I think he has a mouse or a rabbit or a labradoodle. I can't tell. He's definitely eating something. He got something.
He's got a freshman.
Yeah. Now I know where Noah's at. I couldn't get a hold of him. He's in the talons of that hawk. Okay. Well, that was so distracting. Anyway, okay. Well, just to wrap it up with nonprofits, the reason I brought it up as a current issue is because wherever you work, you're either going to be working for a nonprofit or your organization is probably going to somehow get connected to a nonprofit. I mean, Amazon is connected to a ton of nonprofits. Some big companies, they establish a second company that's a nonprofit so that they can give to a nonprofit that they have control over. And so I'm involved in the Ankeny Chamber of Commerce nonprofit. You know, they're not trying to make any money other than cover their expenses. They're trying to promote the good of the community. And so that's the Chamber of Commerce. So, okay, let's move on to, we already talked about hubris, born of success, stage 2, undisciplined pursuit of more. You guys already talked about I think we had, was it Alyssa? Were you the one that walked through the outline of this, I think? So let's go to, so in the discussion, I think it was in Alyssa's summary, but in that chapter, it talks about making sure that you have the right people in key seats. That was one of the things that it was there were marks of organizations that were going into stage 2. And one of the things is they don't put the right people into key seats. They just put bodies into key seats. And so you have problems. So in one of the appendices of the book, it gave these suggestions to make sure an organization has the right people in key seats. Make sure that whoever you put into the key seat is a good fit with the core values of the organization. So let me ask our Zoom people, what do you think that means that someone needs to fit with the core values of the organization? Katie, what do you think that means?
I think it means like they need to agree with like what's actually the business is putting forward and what their main goals are and values. They can't like have major differences there if they want them to function right in the company.
Yeah. Max, what about you? What do you think that means?
I mean, very similar to what Katie said. They have to agree with what the company is doing and the ideals that it stands for. So, I mean, just something that came to my mind was like, I would not fit the core values of Planned Parenthood. So something like that, where you have to agree with what the company is doing, where it's going, and the ideas that it holds.
Yep. So I think one of the first steps of an organization is to make sure that all the people that they're interviewing understand what their core values are, because, you know, it's kind of at least partially the organization's fault if they end up putting people in key positions that don't have their core values, because they must not have communicated what those were, unless the person's dishonest. So you have to communicate those. This is what the author said. He said, great companies build almost cult-like cultures where those who do not share the institution's values find themselves surrounded by antibodies and ejected like a virus. Appropriate. People often ask, how do we get people to share our core values? The answer, you don't. You hire people who already have a predisposition to your core values and then hang on to them. So, you know, this happens sometimes in ministries. A ministry has a need. They're like, hey, we need a new youth leader. We need a new worship leader, whatever. And so in an effort to meet a need, they bring someone in that doesn't necessarily hold the same core values. And then within a short period of time, a lot of conflict erupts within an organization. Now, it could be that the person has core values, they maybe have different standards or whatever, but sometimes people make rush decisions. I had a guy one time ask me to come and
run his youth group. He literally just met me in the yard. I was remodeling a house, and he asked me if I would come and lead his youth group. I'm thinking, what if I was a cult member? You know, how do you know that I even believe? But to them, it was just checking off a box. Well, it guarantees going to end up in big problems, you know? And so you got to make sure you hire the right people. Okay, so number 2, core people, the right people don't need to be tightly managed. What does that mean? Emmy, what do you think that means?
I think that they need to be trustworthy. They have to have, the managers specifically have to be confident in that person's ability to do a job without having to be micromanaged. So they have a full grasp on what the job entails and what needs to get done. So much so that the managers don't feel like they need to be watching over their shoulder.
Yeah, yeah. And what a great thing for the person too, to know that they don't have to be watched over all the time, but that they have the freedom to work. The author said, the moment you feel the need to tightly manage someone, you might have made a hiring mistake. And these are specifically talking about leaders. If you have the right people, you don't need to spend a lot of time, quote unquote, motivating or managing them. They'll be productively neurotic, self-motivated, and self-disciplined, compulsively driven to do the best they can because it's simply part of their DNA. So when you're hiring leaders, that's what you're looking for. People that so there's 2 kinds of motivation, right? There's what's called extrinsic and intrinsic. Do you know what the difference is?
So intrinsic motivation is something that comes from your character or something about your personality that drives you to do better or to do good work. And extrinsic would be some motivator outside of yourself, like a boss or a deadline or something like that, that the environment presses upon you to do better.
Yep, exactly. It's basically, you know, you think of the word extrinsic, okay, exterior, you have a motivation like a reward or a consequence or a boss or a deadline. And that you can still get a job done with extrinsic motivation, but intrinsic motivation, someone's coming from the heart, someone's coming from their DNA, someone's coming from their training. That's really in an ideal situation. If you can hire a leader that has intrinsic motivation, once they know the job, you shouldn't have to tightly manage them or micromanage them, as Emmy said. So, all right. Number 3, the right people, and we talked about this a little bit the other day, understand that they do not have jobs. They have responsibilities. Daniel, since we talked about this one already a little bit, what does that look like in the banking world? When someone looks at their responsibility as a manager, a leader, as a job versus a responsibility, like have you seen in your peers or people you've worked with, some of them looking at it as a job versus some looking at responsibility? Where does the company weed those out? I don't know.
Yeah, well, I'd say it's kind of hard to think of bad examples I've heard in because you don't really make it to management without having those qualities. I mean, previous jobs I've definitely seen it, obviously, but for like the current job, a good example is my manager that he's always around for like key times when we need him, and he always like knows, he's really good about knowing when he needs to like get out there and get involved. Like he knows when it's good to be in the back office, knocking out the work he needs to. But then he's like really good about like if we're getting slammed up front, I mean, he doesn't hesitate. Like he's out there helping the tellers, you know, running the teller line. Like most people actually on the line don't even know he's the manager just because he's so willing to like get out there and get on it. So you can definitely tell with him, like he knows the proper balance of responsibilities and he's not focused on time, like, oh, I need to clock in and clock out type of thing. Like if front needs help, he's working up front, you know, but if he understands like I have more pressing managers or more pressing responsibilities as a manager, then he's also like in the back. So you can definitely tell with him, he never seems like he's clocking in and clocking out. Like he won't leave until everything's done. Like he's always offering help at the end of the day. So.
Yeah, that's the perfect illustration of someone that looks at it as a responsibility. It's almost like you know, whether they believe in God or not, but they kind of would look at it as like their God-given responsibility or their God-given duty to fulfill. A lot of people, you know, the word duty has, you know, we used to say, well, you know, we kind of think of like military people, you know, they're serving their country, they're doing their patriotic duty, that these things like that. But that word has kind of taken almost a negative connotation. I think sometimes like, oh, you know, you're forced to do it or you didn't have a choice or whatever. But really, responsibility, duty, I mean, it's an intrinsic motivation to fulfill your responsibility, you know, is to perform your duty. And so doing it with the right heart attitude sounds like Daniel's boss is a great example of that. And what happens is, so Daniel, you see that, and it just naturally makes you want to do that yourself. Like you want to follow in those footsteps. If you want to be a good worker, you want to follow in the same footsteps. So it demonstrates though that leadership, people are watching, and you have a lot of influence. You have a lot of power in someone's life. And at the youngest ages, at the early stages of someone's entry into work, you are super impressionable. And then you got to remember that when you are the one someone's looking up to, whether you're formally their boss or informally in leadership, that they're going to be looking at the way you look at job versus responsibility. So let's see here. The next one, number 4, the right people fulfill their commitments. Joe, what does that mean? Right people fulfill their commitments, especially talking about leaders.
Well, I'd say it just means they're committed to their job and they're gonna keep, like if there's a job to be done, they're gonna keep doing it until it's done. And it doesn't matter like what gets in their way, really. Is they're committed to finishing the job, and they're not gonna be distracted by different things, and like he was saying, it's not, the clock isn't gonna be a part of their what stops them from getting their job done. If the job needs done, they'll stay late or do whatever it takes to get it done. Yes.
So how does that correlate, Joe, to the idea of being overcommitted? Like, how does a leader decide what to say yes to and what to say no to? And because I'm sure there's more stuff that comes along their way than they could possibly do.
Well, I guess leaders have to prioritize what's important to do immediately and what can wait. And they can also delegate to other people some of their responsibilities. So obviously they can't do everything, but they're going to make sure it gets done, even if it's not them doing it. Like they can delegate to other people or hire more people, or but they're just committed to getting it done. And I'd say definitely prioritize. Just make a list of what has to get done now and what can get done later.
Yeah. So there's no way. So a good leader cannot say yes to everything. I think this is a misunderstanding of leadership, especially some cultures have a very hard time saying no. And so what they do is they say yes because that's what you want to hear, but they have no intention of actually doing it. So in the Pacific, in the islands, we experience that. So culturally, it's a greater sin to disappoint someone than to be dishonest with someone. It's just that type of culture. So you have to say yes, even though you know you can't do it. We had a typhoon like what just hit Pensacola, Florida. We had that hit Guam and did a ton of damage. We had to get some temporary classrooms, like shipping containers turned into classrooms. And they worked on them for months. They're supposed to be delivered at 5 a.m. on a Saturday morning. I was out there at 5 a.m. I had talked to the guy the day before. He's like, oh, yeah, we'll be delivering them. I was calling him every couple of days to make sure we're on track because school had to start. We had to have these things in place. Calling him. I'm out there at 5 a.m. on Saturday morning, not answering his phone. About 6 a.m., finally get a hold of him on his personal cell phone. He's like, yeah, they're on their way. Stood out there for another hour, 2 hours, nothing. Tried calling him, didn't answer his phone. Basically, they weren't even done building them yet. He just kept telling me, because culturally, you don't give someone bad news. I'm like, that's worse. Just tell me the truth. Like, if it's not ready, it's not ready. I literally sit out here for hours waiting for these things, and you knew they weren't even on the truck because they're not done yet. And it was another month before they were even done. It was crazy. It was tragic. But, you know, basically they were overcommitted. And so being overcommitted degrades the quality of your leadership. So you have to decide. Jocko Willink, some of you guys, I've shown you the video, Extreme Ownership. And Jocko is great. His book, Extreme Ownership, I really like. He has a story there about being in Ramadi, Iraq, and how they had snipers or rooftop shooters shooting down on them. They had people in the streets shooting at them. They had wounded soldiers. They had artillery that needed to come in. It was all this stuff happening at the same time. And everything was a life or death situation. But you can only do one thing at a time. Well, he goes back in the story and talks about how they train Navy SEALs to prioritize and execute. Prioritize and execute. Choose one thing, get it done, go to the next thing. So in that case, it's like, who's going to die first? Okay, solve that first. So everything's equally important. It's like on level of 1 to 10, everything's a 10. But one of these is going to result in someone dying before someone else. So let's deal with that first. And so the idea is, as a leader, you have to prioritize and execute. And if you feel like you've been asked to do 10 things all at once, and you know you can only do one thing at a time, you do have to say, although they are all equally important, something has to be the most important. And that ties into decision making as well. So, okay. The author said, the right people fulfill their commitments. In a culture of discipline, people view commitments as sacred. They do what they say without complaint. Equally, this means that they take great care in saying what they will do, careful to never overcommit or promise what they cannot deliver. So you do what you say, and then you also say what you're going to do. So it's really good way to think about that. Number 5, passion. The right people are passionate about the company and its work. So what does that mean, Alyssa? A leader being passionate about the company and its work.
I think part of it goes back to like it not being a job but a responsibility. So they genuinely care about like people there and like they're committed to what they're doing, not just like, oh, I have to come in to make a paycheck today, but like they actually care about what they're doing and they believe in the cause of what they're doing.
Yeah. So if you don't believe in it, you're going to have a hard time leading in it, right? So, and I've used this illustration for myself. Maybe you guys could relate to this. So, I sold air conditioners for a while. So about 20 years ago, I was an air conditioning salesman, first sales job. It was easy for me to say, this is a worthwhile sales job because it was 100 degrees outside. And there were these little old ladies that had no air conditioning, or the air conditioner they had was not cooling their house. And so I'm like, I'm actually helping people. I mean, obviously I'm making money, my company's making money, but I'm providing a service that's helpful to these little old ladies. So selling air conditioners to me was something I could actually get into. Selling Cadillacs, I don't think I could do it. Not that I don't think that there's a market for Cadillacs. I like Cadillacs. I think, you know, if you're on a fixed income that can afford it, get a Cadillac, whatever, life is short. But for me, that summer, I don't think I could have got passionate about selling Cadillacs to the same little old lady, right? Even if she wanted it really bad, what she needs is air conditioning. And so I could get passionate about selling air conditioners, although it doesn't sound that passionate of a thing, but I could do that because I know it's helping someone versus selling something that isn't necessarily a big help. So, you know, now that illustration breaks down a little bit, but when it comes to leadership though, so not just like a job, but leadership, if you're going to plug people into a leadership role, they got to be passionate about it. I mean, you can't have a sports team where the captain's not passionate about it. Sometimes the captain has to be the most passionate person on the team. They don't necessarily have to be the most gifted athlete, but they do have to love the team. They have to believe in what the coach believes in. They have to really want to win. They have to love their teammates. You wouldn't want to put someone as the stage director in a play that doesn't love drama. They're just doing it because they need community service hours. I mean, that's just not going to work, right? It's got to be someone that really loves it, because the passion is going to fill in all the stuff that's required above and beyond what the normal responsibility is going to take. Okay, last thing here. Oh, it says here, the author said, nothing great happens without passion, and the right people display remarkable intensity. The final one, the right people display window and mirror maturity. And I'll just read this. When things go well, the right people point out the window, giving credit to factors other than themselves. They shine a light on the people who contributed to success to take little credit themselves. Yet when things go awry, they do not blame circumstances or other people for setbacks. They point in the mirror and say, I'm responsible. So when things go well, they look out the window. Why did this go well? When things don't go well, they look in the mirror and say, let's start with me first. It's pretty good mental picture. So excellent. Okay, thank you guys very much.